This story was so interesting, I finished the entire game without realizing what was going on or even that I finished the game. That's how compelling this plot is, but I've never played a VR game quite like One True Path. But it's not just the narrative that pulled me in, even the controls feel incredibly simple and natural in VR. When you combine that with the appropriate graphics and immersive audio, it's like stepping into a living, breathing storybook. So, this is a VR experience worth your time, but let me explain, starting with the graphics. One of the cool things about One True Path is how the art style changes depending on where you are. If you're outside the stories at the scene of the crime, the visuals aim to create a more realistic look, grounding you in the real world, so to speak, but the moment you step into a book, the art shifts dramatically to match its genre. The dark fantasy world, for instance, sticks to a moody black and white palette, while the space western world explodes with warm, vibrant colors. What ties it all together is the thick outlines around objects and characters, a style that I've just learned is called toon shading. It gives the game a distinctive, almost comic book vibe that makes each setting pop, but I was seriously impressed by even the clarity of text in books. Small print on in-game objects is usually blurry, but not here. Honestly, it reminded me of the attention to detail in AAA games like Half-Life Alyx. All this is to say the visuals do an amazing job immersing you in each world, and if the art doesn't convince you, then just know this game, as of this review, is free on Steam, so you're not missing out if you give it a try. But since I have your attention, let's talk about the mechanics. In One True Path, the mechanics are just as varied and dynamic as the stories you'll explore. No, this isn't sponsored, my channel is too small for that. Obligatory like and subscribe, but each book introduces its own playstyle, keeping the gameplay fresh while sticking to a consistent theme for that world. For example, in the Dark Fantasy book, you're battling it out with skeletons. It's not just hack and slash though, you need to follow a precise 3-cut pattern after bashing them up to take them down for good. Then there's the Crystal Man book where the gameplay flips to something completely different. Here you're hopping from body to body, using telekinesis to navigate what is essentially a deadly butcher factory. The great part about all of this is that as random as it is, it makes sense for the story, which I'll go into in a second. Now, it is worth mentioning that the movement system is teleportation based, so you'll have set positions you can jump to during exploration or combat. It might sound limiting, but the game gives you options to keep it tactical during most fights. They might not be as smooth as you'd like, but they work. Overall, the controls feel intuitive and consistent. For a game this unique, it's dumbfoundingly impressive how smooth the experience is. I've played plenty of VR titles where the controls got frustrating fast, but that's not the case here. It's straightforward and as accessible as it gets. Now, as for the story I mentioned earlier, storytelling is the heartbeat of One True Path, and it shows in every part of the game. Though the main adventure only lasts about an hour, it's packed with enough twists, turns, and hidden clues to keep you thinking long after the credits roll. The overarching plot challenges you to figure out who unalived Jack, a renowned author, and it leaves just enough breadcrumbs for you to piece it together on your own. One thing I appreciate is that Jack doesn't feel like he's just a set piece to move the game along.
Look at this mess. Murdered twice over. Once with a dagger. Okay, fine, classic. But in the back?
At least to me, this story feels fresh, with the game focusing on its own unique setup, making the journey feel original. The pacing really complements the story as well. Instead of dragging you through long-winded sections, it moves quickly, jumping from one short story world to the next. Each segment is bite-sized but meaningful, giving you just enough time to understand the rules of each book before throwing you into the action. What's really clever is how the game refuses to keep you grounded in just one book. You're constantly bouncing between stories, with one book containing clues you'll need to unlock parts of another. Despite this constant shifting, everything flows seamlessly. The transitions never feel jarring. The back and forth storytelling adds to the sense of unraveling a complex mystery. It's no wonder this game is being marketed as a genre-bending VR adventure. It blends elements of mystery, fantasy, and even a touch of sci-fi into a single cohesive experience. It's fast, engaging, and it's built to keep you thinking. But speaking of engaging, the audio in One True Path absolutely blew me away. From the moment narration kicked in, it was clear that a lot of care and effort went into crafting this experience.
Soon all of Belleroth will burn like this, if you cannot stop the tide of evil. Suddenly, a crackling that suffuses the air. You taste the tang of a summer storm. You gaze in amazement as a rupture opens in the air.
The voice acting alone is top tier. It just does an incredible job building tension and selling the lingering dread behind the mystery. Even the main villains in each world come to life through their own performances. Each has a distinct personality that's not only compelling but also well acted, making them memorable.
And the rest of you skim wastes, first one to bring me the former sheriff's scalp gets double victuals for a week. All right, 2 weeks.
I wasn't pulled out of the experience even once by anything sound related, which is uncommon for me in VR. Sounds like clashing blades weren't exactly what I expected from clashing blades, but it's clear the audio is tailored to fit the theme of each book. Honestly, it just works. The stylized approach to audio feels intentional. Whether it's the angry rambling of a psycho space butcher or the complacent tone of a partner turned corrupt sheriff, the audio does a consistent job enhancing the whole experience. The options also play an important role in enhancing this experience, so let's talk about that next because like every other aspect of this game, it feels consistent. The design matches the overall vibe of the game perfectly. It reminds me of the menus from Chernobyl again, but instead of the audio mimicking a Geiger counter, the visuals here feel tailored to the tone and themes of this story-driven mystery. Of course, the game includes the basics like the option to play seated or standing, which is always a welcome feature in VR. There's also a vignette slider for those who experience motion sickness, letting you adjust the intensity to your comfort level. What really stood out to me though is how the menu explains what each setting actually does when you hover over it. As someone who plays a lot in VR, this feels like such a simple thing, but it's surprisingly rare. Too often, I'm left guessing what an option is actually changing because of vague labels. Here, the clarity and thoughtfulness are a big win. Now, while I usually prefer menus that feel like part of the game world, something baked in and immersive, this one still manages to maintain that balance of usability and atmosphere. You can tell the development team put effort into making the entire experience feel cohesive, and it definitely pays off. So, if there's one thing to take away about One True Path, it's how deeply this game pulls you in. From the moment you dial into the first book, which is done with phones for some reason, you're not just playing a game, it feels like you're thrown into a living story. Despite being in early access, the game's polish is seriously impressive. Each world is distinct, the mechanics are smooth, and the pacing keeps you constantly engaged. Whether you're slicing skeletons in a dark fantasy realm or uncovering clues about the real-ish world, every piece of this game is designed to pull you deeper and deeper into the mystery. That's what makes One True Path so exciting. It's not just a VR game, it's an overall impressive experience. An experience that can't be scored like I score other games because early access titles aren't complete. So if you're looking for your next immersive experience or just want to dive headfirst into a unique VR game, this is one to keep on your radar. But hey, if you're enjoying these dives into VR gaming, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe because who knows, your next favorite game might just be one click away.